Welcome to the course on advocacy, brought to you by allceus.com, your one-stop for unlimited CEUs. The objectives of this course are to help you define advocacy, identify at least 5 methods for advocating for your clients, and discuss the ways in which you can advocate for your clients. The definition of advocacy is sort of vague a lot of times, so we're going to talk about some characteristics of advocacy. First, advocacy aims to influence public policy and resource allocation decisions. So when we're in the state capitol advocating to get money for providing services, when we're working with different providers in our local area to advocate for our clients to get services, or when we advocate with an employer for our client to be hired on with them. Those are all resource allocation or public policies decisions. Advocacy is motivated from moral, ethical, or faith principles, or simply to protect an asset of interest. It can include many activities, including media campaigns, public speaking, commissioning and publishing of research, and filing friend of the court briefs. In order to determine how we can best advocate for our client, the first thing we need to do is to define our client's needs. Many of our consumers need education, either basic education or enhanced vocational type education. They need employment. If they don't have it, or if they're underemployed, we may need to advocate for them to get in a high-wage, high-demand job. Some clients need medication, and it's up to us to advocate for them or with them, with their doctor and with the pharmaceutical companies if they need to be on voucher programs or if they need to have a different medication other than the one that they're on. Housing, that's an obvious one. Safety, we can advocate for our consumers with regard to safety by working with law enforcement, firefighters, etc., to help them understand that in these environments where many of our consumers live, yes, there is a higher crime rate, but there are also good people, and a lot of people who are addicts are good people at heart. They're just doing bad things right now. So if we can help provide a safe environment for them, they're not going to be as likely to engage in illegal or unsafe behaviors. Treatment or case management. Sometimes we have to advocate for the people who pay for treatment, advocate with insurance companies, advocate with your own agency in order to get consumers in a particular type of treatment. I know we have a program where I work that's called Assertive Community Treatment, and it's reserved for a very select few. It's a very small program, and sometimes in order to get a consumer in there, it takes, well, it feels like you have to cross over 6 oceans in order to get somebody enrolled in the program. Sometimes the consumer cannot do that for themselves. They feel disempowered when they're told no the first time. If you as a clinician feel extremely strong about it, or you as an advocate, then it's important to say, okay, you said no, so do I need to represent my argument? Do I need to go to your superior? Or do I need to relook at whether this is something that my client really needs? Prevention services, always needed. A lot of people discount the effectiveness of prevention services or how much they're needed because they're so focused on putting a band-aid on the problems that are going on right now. Transportation. In many rural and suburban areas, getting to counseling appointments, getting to treatment is a challenge in and of itself, or getting to work. We live in a community in which it's about 13 miles to the nearest sort of town. So people who live in our community, and there's about 20,000 people spread out, of course, but in order to get into the major employers, they have to have a way, and we don't have a bus system that'll take them in there. So transportation's another thing we advocate for. In our community recently, they created a bus system that runs out from our community into the next closest town twice in the morning and twice in the evening. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And people need support and belonging. And advocating for that may mean advocating with their family, advocating with their church, advocating with local community groups to help the people get the support and belonging and sense of community that they really need in order to thrive. One of the next steps in advocating, once you've identified what the need is identify supporting reasons. Why does this person need this resource more than someone else at this time? And will this person effectively use this resource? If I have a person who desperately needs a job, and there's a perfect job for them, and I really want them to get it, but I know that they'll get that job, and in 3 weeks, they're probably going to be not showing up, or they don't have transportation, or something else. I'm probably not going to advocate so hard for that person for that job yet, because this is not the right time. I need to advocate for them to get transportation or child care or whatever else they need so they can be successful. Education comes in all forms. GEDs, basic literacy, and this can be filling out forms, this can be English as a second language, this can be a whole variety of different things. Some people speak very well, they don't write well. Some people can write as far as the gross motor skills are concerned, but their spelling is deplorable. So we need to help the person assess all these areas. Education regarding life skills, budgeting, how to ride the bus, and time management. Those are all big on the list for many of our consumers. And vocational education, teaching them a basic skill that can help them get a job. When we're talking about education, though, we need to consider special needs such as dyslexia, adult ADHD, other mental illnesses, including substance abuse, and whether they may be gifted. Everybody has their own unique way of learning and their own temperament, but some people need a little extra assistance in order to function in an artificial environment, one that they can't make conform to meet their needs. Advocating with regard to employment often means convincing employers why your client is the person they want to hire. We can do this through supported employment, where the employers don't risk as much, welfare to work subsidies that are through your local welfare to work program, job coaching, and just providing transportation. If we can provide a person who has excellent skills, who otherwise can do the job, and we can somewhat guarantee that because we're transporting them and they're in our program, we know that they're going to show up and do their work, then they're probably a pretty good candidate for the job. The other reasons you might want to try to convince employers is to take a risk on your consumers, and hiring anybody is a risk, is based on the consumer's progress in treatment, desire for the job, or a host of other factors. We need to work with our consumers before they go into the interview, though, so they can advocate for themselves and help the employer understand why they're the best person for the job without us having to go in and really back them up. Medication is a big bugaboo for a lot of our consumers. We need to help them get and remain on all of their medication. Now, that's only part of the issue. In order to get and remain on it, they can go through pharmaceutical company programs. If you Google Pfizer, they have indigent drug program, voucher programs, health departments, local community health agencies. Walmart and Publix have special discount programs for many of their drugs. And a lot of the local free clinics that serve the homeless and indigent populations are often linked into a lot of the programs whereby people can get free or reduced cost medication. Now, getting medication is only half the battle, as I said. The other part is getting on the right medication. And too often our consumers just take whatever the doctor says and says, yes sir, and takes the medication, even if it's not making them feel better or making them feel worse. So it's important for us, since we work with the clients day in and day out, or at least once a week, to help them be able to articulate what their symptoms are, what the side effects of their medication are, and what they feel they need. Our consumers need to be educated. The doctors don't know everything, and the doctors don't know every client better than the client knows themselves. Very often, we will see adult ADHD and bipolar misdiagnosed. They get flip-flopped, and people tend to just say, oh, that person's bipolar, and not look at the adult ADHD symptoms or the fact that there's really not a depressive episode. It's just a lot of impulsivity and agitation, etc. One thing I found that works very, very well with the psychiatrists in our area is if you just go online and print out the checklists of the symptoms. You can either get it from the DSM-4 or you can Google whatever the disorder is, like adult ADHD checklist, and you'll get 3 or 4 of them that come up. Print those off, have your client fill out the checklist, mark the symptoms that are appropriate to them, and then hand it to the doctor. That way the doctor has something that they can look at, and it sets a groundwork for a conversation, so the client doesn't feel intimidated, doesn't forget to tell them certain symptoms that are going on, or whatever. It's clearer in the doctor's mind, it's clearer in the patient's mind, and the patient is able to try to get what works for them. Again, if a patient is taking a medication and they feel it's making them worse, you need to advocate for them to A, look at what the side effects are supposed to be and how long they've been on the medication. If they've only been on the medication for 48 hours, a lot of the psychotropics have like a 72-hour window where the side effects are worse. But if they're either intolerable side effects, or if the consumer feels like they're getting worse or not getting any better and they've been on the medication for a reasonable period of time, with SSRIs it's 4 to 6 weeks, with some of your other medications it's a little bit less, encourage them to go back and talk with their psychiatrist or their physician and tell them, this isn't working for me. I have one consumer who was put on Prozac, and she has an anxiety disorder in addition to depression, and the Prozac made her feel like she was going to crawl out of her skin. She was jumpy and agitated and irritable all the time. And she finally went back and talked to the doctor, and they switched her over to a different SSRI, and it's made a world of difference for this consumer. Truth be told, most doctors will prescribe what they normally prescribe. If they usually prescribe Prozac, they're going to prescribe Prozac. Some of the newer drugs, if your client wants to try them, you need to advocate for the client to actually bring it up and say, what do you think about Wellbutrin? Or, that's not even a new drug anymore, but you get my point. Housing. Many of our consumers, especially those with co-occurring disorders, have difficulty getting housing. Often they've had periods of homelessness. Many have felony charges for substance abuse, substance possession, possession of paraphernalia, sale, etc. So it's hard to get them into a lot of the Section 8 housing. It's important that we advocate for our clients to help them find affordable housing in healthy neighborhoods. And sometimes that involves the consumer taking maybe a room over somebody's garage, maybe their sponsor or somebody in the program, and bartering for their housing for a while, maybe doing some carpentry or lawn work, or I don't know. There are a lot of different ways, creative ways, that people can find housing, but it's important that they're in a safe place where they feel like they are able to rest and grow and recover. Safety. We need to educate law enforcement about the nature of co-occurring disorders. Just because Sally's a crack addict doesn't mean Sally's any less of a person. Now, when she's on her crack, she may be quite a handful. But if she is trying to do the next right thing, then we need to work with her as best as we can to help her either get into treatment or get in an environment that is safe. We need to work with victim advocates to ensure that all clients have the opportunity to live in a safe environment. We don't want to take someone who comes from what we know to be a drug-infested neighborhood, even though we can't call it as such, and put them right back in there. That's like taking an alcoholic and telling him to go live over a bar. It doesn't make any sense. So we need to help people live in environments that are safe, psychologically and physically. We need to create neighborhood coalitions that work to improve community connection, involvement, and organization. When there's connection, involvement, and organization in a community, people are talking, people are watching out for each other. They're not hiding in their house hoping that the people on the corner aren't going to bother them. So open those doors, encourage those community coalitions and speaking out and standing up. Treatment and case management. We need to advocate for wraparound services. And I've been harping on that all along. The housing, the transportation, the child care. Remember Maslow's hierarchy. The foundation of Maslow's hierarchy is your biological and safety needs, followed by your needs for love and belonging. And then we start talking about self-esteem and being all that you can be, etc. We need to advocate for our consumers, because if they're hungry, sick, scared, and tired, they're not going to do the next right thing. They're going to do whatever it takes to get by. We need to set up a safety web in our community that works with churches, food pantries, homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters, and clothing and thrift stores, child care if we can, to make sure that our consumers have the ability to access everything they need in their early recovery. Finally, we need to ensure clients are stepped down, not turned out. One of my biggest pet peeves is when we discharge somebody from residential and they're done. They found recovery and they're going to go to a couple of meetings and they'll be fine. No, you don't go from 24/7 structure to no structure at all and expect that everything's going to be fine. Consumers really need to be stepped down. They go from residential to IOP, maybe even just for a month. Then they're stepped down to traditional outpatient, aftercare, and meetings. But it's a process to make sure that the person is eased back into the community. And remember that prevention is cheaper than treatment. It reduces crime, poverty, and suffering, improves the economy. It can be implemented by laypersons. It provides youth an alternative, safe place to be and a sense of community. We need to advocate with our community groups to get out there and create environments that provide a sense of connection, provide positive role models for the youth, provide them something to do besides knock off a liquor store or break into your car. Transportation is yet another one of those wraparound services. If consumers can't get to places to meet their basic needs, they can't get to the grocery store, they can't get to work, they can't get to childcare, they can't get to school, they're not going to do so well. We need to ensure that clients can get from one place to another. Now, transportation's one option. Another option is encouraging people who can't drive or don't have a car to move in somewhere where they can ride their bike to meet all of their needs. We can identify the cost savings to the community by ensuring clients can get to appointments and stay medicated so they can stay out of jail and break the cycle of mental illness and addiction. We can also identify another cost benefit to the community through the influx of persons receiving services, which draws down state monies and actually creates additional jobs. We're not bringing more addicts into town. We're bringing more counselors into town, treating those people who are addicts, and creating a healthier community. Support and belonging doesn't have to cost a thing. Like prevention, it can be provided by laypersons or even over the phone. But it's imperative for sustained recovery for people to have someone that they can call when they're having a bad day, or even when they're having a good day. They need to share their joys as well as their sorrows. It provides an outlet for stress and reduces isolation. You think of your typical alcoholic who gets upset, has a bad day, gets a bottle and goes and sits by himself and drinks and wallows in his own misery. Well, we don't want people to wallow in their own misery. We want them to reach out, ask for help, and ask for support. In sum, clients have a variety of biopsychosocial needs. Part of counseling involves ensuring that we are able to identify those needs, help clients identify resources to meet those needs, and advocate for and with clients to help them have access to those resources.